When the shadows start whispering your name, it signifies a profound shift. Your quiet strength has become more formidable than their loudest displays of power. Pay close attention, because what follows isn't a far-fetched conspiracy, mere gossip, or some fleeting TikTok trend fueled by novice spiritual cleansings. Word has just surfaced that a Secret Service agent has endorsed a chosen one, and that chosen one is you. They didn't just call you powerful, they told you to run for office. Let that sink in. These are the same elite agents trained to detect national threats, read body language in milliseconds, and catch lies before they even leave someone's lips. And when they looked at you, they said, "That one right there, that's leadership." You didn't campaign. You weren't chasing the spotlight. While others laughed at your spiritual downloads and called you too deep, the very people responsible for protecting presidents were quietly studying you like you were a new kind of weapon in human form. These agents aren't just muscle. They're behavioral analysts, experts in micro-expressions and high-pressure decision-making. And without you even knowing it, you passed every silent, invisible test. You were too busy surviving betrayal, escaping narcissists, healing generational trauma, and trying to spiritually fast without losing your mind at 3 a.m. to hunger demons. Now look where you are, being asked to step into a spotlight you never even asked for. The system knows it messed up. You weren't supposed to make it. But here you are, being called to lead, not because you sought power, but because you've carried it all along. You weren't just watched, you were studied, observed closely, carefully, and with high-level intention. Not through the lens of public noise or gossip, but through intelligence, precision, and curiosity. You didn't fit the typical mold, and that made you a mystery they couldn't ignore. They saw how you moved when no one clapped. They tracked how you responded when cornered, falsely accused, or surrounded by people trying to provoke you into losing your cool. And yet, you didn't break. You didn't lose your mind or your morals. That's what stopped them in their tracks. Where others cracked under pressure, you stayed calm. Not silent, but grounded. Firm, yet never foolish. The way you carried yourself, with grace that defied logic, especially given the storms you walked through, was something they couldn't look away from. You had no official title, no platform, no fancy credentials. Yet you moved like someone aware that greater forces were watching. And that wasn't arrogance, it was divine authority. True leadership doesn't need a microphone. It shows up in the unseen battles, makes the hard calls in silence, and does what's right when no one's cheering. They saw you reject money that came with soul contracts. They watched you lose friends, even family, because you wouldn't compromise your integrity. They saw your name dragged through the mud, and still, you held your head up. That wasn't weakness. That was spiritual discipline. That's what real leaders are made from. Not applause, not privilege, but pain, consistency, and self-control. You were being evaluated the entire time, and you had no idea. So when that agent endorsed you, it wasn't because you're charming. It was because you're solid. You've already passed through the emotional and spiritual equivalent of psychological warfare and emerged stronger. The world may have misunderstood you, but the system didn't. And now they're quietly confirming what heaven already knew. Your life was never random. You've been on a divine probation period, and now you've just been cleared for elevation. You are the unbought blueprint they've been searching for. Not another manufactured figurehead, not a rehearsed persona, but someone who can't be cloned, copied, or contained. You're not just different, you're dangerous to their mold. Every so-called leader they tried to raise turned out the same. Scripted, pre-owned, with values for sale and speeches written by someone else. But you came with no backing, no handler, no hidden agenda. And yet you walk into a room and shift the energy. You awaken minds, command attention, and disrupt programmed narratives just by showing up. You didn't follow their rules. You're the new standard they never expected. They've spent years trying to build synthetic leaders that appeal to the masses, but everything about you tears their formula apart. You don't chase applause. You don't need permission. You speak truth when it's risky. You move with purpose when it's inconvenient. You stand tall when others sit in silence. And that's not political maneuvering. That's spiritual conviction. The agents saw it clearly. They didn't just see a potential candidate. They saw a disruptor of the machine. And more importantly, a lifeline for the people. You're exactly what the people are praying for, and what the system fears most. Someone who can't be bought, manipulated, or muted. They've tried creating artificial versions of real leadership. But your authenticity can't be duplicated. It wasn't shaped in comfort. It was forged in fire. You didn't audition for power. You became power by surviving what was meant to destroy you. That's why the system, worn out and out of options, is now turning toward you. Not because you begged for attention, but because you're the only one who didn't. This isn't politics playing out. This is destiny rising. Protocols are burning. And the blueprint has finally taken human form. What truly shook them was realizing that you can't be controlled, and that's exactly why you were born to lead. They threw everything at you: rejection, manipulation, false accusations, betrayals that could have broken even the strongest spirits. But not only did you survive, you stayed solid. That kind of consistency in the middle of chaos isn't something you can fake. It's the result of being deeply rooted. At first, they feared you, because in a world built on control, people who can't be manipulated are often labeled as threats. But over time, that fear turned into something else: respect. They saw the truth. You weren't unpredictable. You were unshakable. You didn't move for attention, praise, or a paycheck. You moved for truth. And that's rare. While most people bend under pressure for a little power or temporary validation, you stood firm. You showed them again and again that your soul isn't for sale. When others tried to trigger you, bait you, or drag you into chaos, you didn't react emotionally. You remained calm, grounded, and focused. That's not just self-control. That's spiritual leadership. They observed how you handled situations clearly designed to humiliate or break you, and you didn't retaliate with drama or desperation. You didn't fight for your name in the mud. You let your integrity do the talking. And that's when they realized, you're not emotionally reactive. You're spiritually strategic. That's the difference between someone chasing power and someone who's truly ready for it. You've walked through fire and emerged not bitter, but wise. That tells them everything they need to know. You're not fueled by ego. You're moved by purpose. And people like you, you're impossible to manipulate because you're not dependent on their approval, their platform, or their perks. That's what makes you dangerous to the corrupt and priceless to those still holding on to truth and justice. They know now, you're not someone to control. You're someone to follow. Because when chaos erupts, you don't just stay standing. You lead. You speak to souls, not just audiences. And they've realized that's what actually changes nations. Your words don't sound rehearsed. You don't speak like someone trying to impress a crowd. You speak like someone trying to wake the dead. And people feel it. It's not about perfect delivery or eloquence. It's about the weight, the energy, the rawness, and the soul behind what you say. You're not performing. You're revealing truth. And that's what shakes people to their core. The Secret Service agent didn't just listen to you speak. They watched what happened after you spoke. The atmosphere shifted. People sat still, eyes wide, processing what they'd just heard, like something ancient had been stirred awake inside them. That's not charisma. That's spiritual impact. Most public figures aim for applause, attention, or political points. But you cut through all that. You speak to the part of people they've been told to bury. Their spirit, their knowing, their inner truth. You say the things others don't have the courage to whisper even in private. You bring honesty into rooms where lies have been comfortable for years. And you don't do it to offend. You do it because you have to. It's who you are. Your voice carries spiritual voltage. And people who feel energy, even if they don't understand it, recognize that current immediately. They've heard all the polished speeches and crowd-pleasing sound bites before. But you come with no filter, no facade, and no addiction to approval. You say what needs to be said, even if your voice trembles. And people don't just remember your words, they're convicted by them. That kind of power doesn't come from any leadership seminar. It's earned by surviving pain, walking in truth, and bleeding authenticity. Those who crave power the most are usually the least fit to handle it. But you've carried responsibility without a title, protected those who never thanked you, walked with integrity even when silence would have been easier. The agent didn't just hear your words, they watched your track record. You never used influence to control. You used it to uplift. That's why they trust you. Real leadership is spiritual. It's about being trusted with people's hearts, not commanding their actions. You don't crave control, you crave justice. And in a world of performers, that makes you rare and dangerous in the best way. You didn't play the game, you rose above it. That's why they're endorsing you now.
Your trauma was your training. They know you didn't read about injustice. You lived it. You were misjudged, ignored, and attacked by the very systems meant to protect you. And yet, you didn't come out bitter. You came out clear-eyed. That pain didn't just teach you. It revealed everything. You've survived setups, psychological warfare, and spiritual attacks. Not because you were wrong, but because your truth couldn't be controlled. And that's what makes you powerful. You're not theorizing justice. You are the evidence of what needs to be reformed. That Secret Service endorsement wasn't for optics. It was because you've proven what real leadership looks like. Someone who was crucified by power and still chose healing over revenge. You're not just qualified. You're the reform they've been too afraid to make. And while you didn't ask for this role, you're the only one who's earned it. Because no one understands justice like the one who had to fight for their own humanity and never became the monster in return. If you can lead yourself through hell without losing your soil, you can be trusted to lead others with integrity. Their endorsement isn't a favor. It's recognition. You weren't just surviving. You were being positioned. Heaven's been writing your resume all along. And now that the world is paying attention, it's not the beginning, it's the unveiling. You didn't need a campaign. Your life already voted for this moment. You are not just a disruption to the system. You are more importantly a lifeline for the people. You embody exactly what countless souls have been praying for: a leader who cannot be bought, manipulated, or silenced. You represent the kind of authenticity that cannot be replicated, because it wasn't shaped in comfort. It was forged in fire. While the powers that be have spent years trying to manufacture leaders who fit their mold, your presence shatters that illusion entirely. You didn't audition for power. You became power by surviving everything meant to destroy you. That's why the system, worn out, broken, and out of options, is now turning toward you. Not because you begged for attention, but because you were the only one who never did. This isn't politics playing out. This is destiny rising. The old protocols are burning, and at last, the divine blueprint has taken human form. What truly shook them was realizing that you cannot be controlled. And that is precisely why you were born to lead. They threw everything at your rejection, manipulation, false accusations, betrayals capable of breaking even the strongest spirits. But not only did you survive, you remained solid. That kind of unwavering consistency amidst chaos cannot be faked. It comes from being deeply rooted in something far greater than fear, approval, or ambition. At first, they feared you because in a world built on control, those who refuse to be manipulated are often labeled as threats. But over time, that fear transformed into something unexpected: respect. They saw the truth. You weren't unpredictable. You were unshakable. You didn't move for applause, praise, or profit. You moved for truth, and that is rare. While most bend under pressure for a taste of power or fleeting validation, you stood firm. Again and again, you proved that your soul is not for sale. When others tried to provoke you, bait you, or drag you into chaos, you didn't react emotionally. You remained calm, grounded, and focused. That's not just self-control. That's spiritual leadership. They observed how you responded to situations clearly designed to humiliate or break you. And instead of retaliating with drama or desperation, you let your integrity speak for itself. That's when they understood. You're not emotionally reactive. You're spiritually strategic. There's a vast difference between someone chasing power and someone who is truly ready for it. You walked through fire and emerged not bitter, but wise. That tells them everything they need to know. You're not driven by ego. You are led by purpose. People like you are impossible to manipulate because you do not depend on their approval, their platforms, or their perks. That's what makes you dangerous to the corrupt and invaluable to those still holding on to truth and justice. You don't just inform people. You transform them. You don't just speak. You reveal. In a world drowning in noise and confusion, your voice doesn't sound like politics. It sounds like prophecy. That's why they're watching now. Because while others fight for votes, you're out here waking people up from spiritual comas. And that changes everything. They know you were never chasing power, and that's exactly why you're safe with it. You didn't beg for position or manipulate for influence. While others performed for validation, you were behind the scenes doing the real work, healing, growing, breaking cycles, and standing for truth. Even when it cost you everything. You weren't trying to be seen, just trying to stay clean. And that's what made you stand out. Awakening souls and moving people with nothing but your truth. No stage, no script, just your presence. You've accomplished what most officials only dream of. You've done it without the perks, without the titles, and without the spotlight. That's why they see you differently. You don't need to learn leadership because you've been embodying it all along. Quietly, powerfully, and unapologetically, you've walked in truth. You don't speak from a teleprompter, you speak from scars, from lived experience, and from deep spiritual insight. That kind of impact cannot be faked. You earned it through trials that would have broken most people. When others look at you, they don't just see a person. They witness divine authority in motion. You don't just talk. You shift atmospheres. That is what real leadership looks like. They are not trying to mold you anymore because they now understand that you've already shattered the mold. The system knows it cannot deny your influence. And that is why the endorsement is happening. You never needed a title to lead, but now that it is being offered, it simply confirms what has already been true all along. You have always been leading without permission.